It all began one quiet evening in a little village surrounded by soft green hills and a thick forest that everyone called the Whispering Woods, not because it was scary, but because sometimes, when the wind blew just right, the trees would sound like they were softly talking to each other. And in that village lived a curious little girl named Layla who loved stories and nature and collecting shiny pebbles. From the riverbank one evening after dinner, she sat on the porch listening to the wind dance through the trees, and she thought she could hear a voice calling her name gently, softly, like a breeze saying, "Layla, Layla, come see, come see." She looked around and asked her grandma, "Did you hear that?" Her grandma smiled and said, "It's just the forest wind. It likes to talk when it is happy." Layla giggled, but a little part of her heart felt something different, like the trees really were calling her. Just before bed, she opened her window a little to hear the wind better and placed one of her favorite river pebbles on the windowsill as a little offering for the forest. As she drifted off to sleep, the wind seemed to whisper again, "Layla, come see." And when she opened her eyes, she wasn't in her room anymore. She was standing at the edge of the forest, but the trees were glowing softly in colors of gold and silver and blue like dream light. She looked down and realized she was wearing a cloak made of soft leaves that rustled gently. With every step, a small creature appeared before her, a squirrel wearing tiny glasses and carrying a rolled-up map. He bowed and said, "Welcome, Layla. We've been waiting for you. You have been chosen as this year's forest listener." "What is a forest listener?" she asked. The squirrel adjusted his glasses and explained, "Every 100 years the forest chooses one kind-hearted child to hear its hidden stories, to help it remember, to help it grow." Layla's eyes grew wide with wonder, and she said, "I'd love to listen, I really would." The squirrel, whose name was Bramble, handed her the map and said, "Your journey begins with the circle of echoes." Layla followed the glowing path through trees that seemed to hum gently around her. She arrived at a circle of ancient stones, each one carved with swirls and shapes. When she stood in the center, the wind carried old voices through the air, voices of birds singing of migration, rivers whispering tales of fish and turtles, trees speaking of storms and sunshine. Layla stood still, listening carefully, and she repeated what she heard, and as she spoke, the stones lit up one by one. The forest thanked her for listening and gifted her a pendant shaped like a leaf. It sparkled and whispered, "You're doing well, child of the wind." Her next step was through the Meadow of Moods, a giant field filled with flowers that changed color based on how you felt. As Layla walked through it, the flowers turned light yellow and soft green, showing joy and calm. But suddenly she heard a small sobbing sound under a big sunflower. She found a tiny fox with floppy ears wiping its eyes. "What is wrong, little fox?" she asked gently. The fox sniffled and said, "I lost my laugh, and now I can play with my friends." Layla sat beside the fox and told it silly jokes and stories about squirrels who think they ray acrobats and owls that wear hats. Slowly the fox began to giggle and then laugh until it rolled in the grass. The flowers around them turned bright orange and pink, and the fox gave Layla a feather and said, "This is for tickling away sadness. Use it when someone needs joy." Layla tucked the feather into her leafy cloak and continued deeper into the forest. She passed over a silver stream where fish leapt and whispered riddles, and crossed a bridge made of spider silk so fine it shimmered like moonlight. Finally she arrived at the canopy of time, where trees grew so tall their tops touched the stars, and their trunks held memories within their rings. There she met an old turtle named Sage, who moved slowly but saw everything. Sage said, "If you truly want to be the forest's listener, you must listen not just with ears, but with your heart." Layla nodded and sat with Sage under the starlit leaves for what felt like hours, listening to the soft rhythms of the forest's past. Children's laughter from long ago, stories of creatures now gone, storms survived, seeds planted. Layla began to hum a little tune, and the forest hummed with her. Sage gave her a wooden flute carved from a branch older than the village itself, and told her, "Whenever you play this, the forest will know it has heard your heart, and its heart are now one." Layla smiled and thanked him deeply as she returned along the glowing paths. Animals peeked out to wave goodnight. Fireflies lit the way back to the edge of the woods, and as she stepped back into the village, dawn was just beginning to rise. She found herself waking up in bed with the soft cloak still around her shoulders, and the wooden flute resting beside her pillow. From that day on, Layla spent more time listening than talking. She wrote down the whispers of the trees and shared them with her friends. She helped animals find their homes and cheered up anyone feeling down with the tickle feather. And every time the wind blew gently through the forest, it would whisper, "Thank you, Layla, thank you for listening." And she would smile and whisper back, "I am always here."